I think it should always be story takes precedent over sales. And I think if you keep that in the back of your mind, particularly those of us that are working as florists or in the creative medium, I think it's really simple. If you make it beautiful, if you make it interesting, people will respond to that.
I'm thrilled today to be interviewing Duncan McCabe. Duncan is a freelance content creator and he specialises in photography and also videography. He is an incredibly talented person and I've had the pleasure of working with him several times over the last few years, and he's helped me immensely with advice on how to up my video game. He shares so many valuable hints and tips in this week's episode that you'll be taking notes the whole way through, so you might want to grab a pen and paper now. He also at the very end shares his 3 top tips for really thinking about creating content, and hints on videography in particular. So I hope you enjoy the video as much as I did chatting to him, and here we are together. A very warm welcome, Duncan. I'm so excited to speak to you.
Oh, thank you very much, Rona. It's lovely. I was really flattered that you invited me onto your podcast. Thank you very much.
But you know how I just think you're the king of video as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, very, very sweet of you to say. I wouldn't go quite that far, but
Well,
very, very sweet of you to say.
I always love that whenever we meet up, we always have a bit of a geek out and talk about cameras and video and share information. Normally it's you telling me lots of advice and I'm sort of going, oh.
We do share quite a lot of tips on social, video, and all of those kind of nitty gritty. It can get a bit geeky.
In a nice way.
In a nice way. I think the way technology, I mean, if you imagine when we first met, which was about 5 years ago, no,
At
10 years ago.
least. Yeah, I was going to say it's when McQueen's first went to Claridge's, I think. So when was that?
Oh, so that has got to be a good, about 9 years ago, I'd
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. So things have
And if
changed a little bit on the social media and internet scene since then, haven't they?
unbelievably, it's been an absolute transformation.
Oh, yeah.
And it's
Well, I'm sure you can sort of help document that when I ask you the big question. Could you share your career to date? Because I know it's had quite a few little twists and turns. So go ahead.
twists and turns. I think when you get to this ripe old age, I think there's generally been a few twists and turns. But yeah, so I started many, many years ago. I actually started as a hairdresser, and this is way back in the 80s.
And I
And I
didn't know
worked,
that.
yeah, I worked for these guys, and it was like very typical 80s. They used to wear like leather trousers and long hair at the back, and it was kind of highlighted, and it was super glamorous, and it was like really sort of glamorous girls and lots of tans and stuff. And I remember working at a hairdresser, but I was really bad. So I had a number of issues of things that went wrong. I remember when I was training art, it was like the hair was very much flicked. There's lots of curls and waves back in them days. And I just remembered getting a brush stuck in somebody's hair that needed about 4 people to unpick it.
Oh my
And
goodness.
yeah, so I had a couple of things like that, and it made me question as to
Really?
whether as to whether that was the right path for me. And I had a friend who was opening a flower shop, and this is in Birmingham, where I'm from. And looking back now, I realised that it was a kind of it was a little vanity project that her parents had set her up, and I don't think she was really that serious about it. But she looked at me and she said, "I want you to come and work for me," and she sort of picked me out. And I actually thought it was quite ridiculous at first, because I've never ever considered what a florist was or what a florist did. And she asked me to go and work for her, and I said yeah, and I did, and I just loved it from the very, very first moment. And I think there's something really special about working with flowers. I think there's so much to learn, And particularly at the very, very early days when you first get introduced to flowers, you learn so many different little tips and tricks that it becomes it can become a bit obsessive for a lot of people. They kind of really, I mean, you must know that from your experience of working with flowers.
I remember when I first started studying floristry and I couldn't get over all these terms I had to learn, like frog and what was conditioning and all the flower names. Absolutely.
Well, I just remembered it being like really, really wonderful, and it was like a real obsession. It was a complete and utter kind of falling in love, and I remembered I used to be, walking down in a park and looking at the way the trees grew and looking at the way the flowers grew, and I was kind of super obsessed when I very, very first started. And I kind of took to it a lot easier than I did in my hairdressing career.
So, how old were you then, do you think, Duncan, when you started
So I
flowers?
think it was about 18, 19.
Oh, wow, really young then.
Yes, I was really young. So I'd only really done a bit of training as a hairdresser and decided to kind of change, pivot, as it were. And so it just went from there. And so I worked in really small, and when I look back now to the way that floristry was, it was like very small, very provincial little flower shop, huge amount of cellophane, lots of uh, polythene ribbons, and it was kind of a little bit chintzy. And some of the things that we used to do, so we used to there was, I don't know if you're an old school florist, and I don't know whether you've seen this, but they used to have, it was like a cardboard shape, like a picture frame, and inside it was like sort of 2D, 3D, and you'd actually place flowers inside, and it was like
I
a
don't
picture.
remember them. No,
Yeah,
nice.
that's how old I am. So this is how it was back in the day. And I remember looking at, because I think people like Jane Packer, people like Paula Pryke, people like McQueen's, I could see that there was a new breed of florist, and that was incredibly exciting and very, very different to how I'd been shown how to work with flowers. So I kind of progressed on from there, really, and worked in a few different shops. I worked in a city centre shop in Birmingham, which was opposite a theatre.
Hmm.
We used to have like there was a ballet company there as well. So we used to have lots of stuff that we'd do on stage and that kind of thing. And yeah,
So, what made
so,
you move to London then?
so I moved to Manchester
Okay.
from, yes, I lived in Manchester for about 10 years.
Okay.
And yeah, so I lived in Manchester, had a fantastic time. So we're kind of well into the 90s now. I actually worked for myself as a florist in Manchester. So I had a small shop, and I actually had a contemporary looking flower stand that was at Piccadilly train station in
Wow.
Manchester. And yeah, so I worked for myself, and it was really, really hard work, really hard going, but enjoyed it immensely. It was amazing. I think in the back of my mind, I'd always been looking at these amazing florists that I'd seen in London, and it was definitely the Jane Packers, the McQueens, and doing things in a completely different way. So I decided to move to London, and I really wanted to go and work at one of these florists. And I was really lucky to start working at Jane Packer when I first moved to London, which was really, really amazing, because I think the florists that I had worked for were really inspired by Jane Packer. Because if you think back, 20
Mm.
years ago, it was a completely different approach, certainly to what I'd been taught. And yeah, so I kind of took the plunge and moved to London, which I've absolutely loved. It's been really amazing. And yeah,
So, what did you do when you were at Jane Packer? What was your role there?
it was amazing being at Jane Packer because I got lots of opportunities presented to me. I remembered, I think Jane Packer did flowers for some amazing restaurants at the time. So I used to get up in the middle of the night to go and do the flowers and install them in these fabulous restaurants. And I remember driving through London, in the very, very early hours of the morning. It's a completely different way of sort of working with flowers than it was in Manchester. But I actually started teaching in the flower school thanks to Jane, actually, because she was teaching a class and she asked me to come and assist her one day. And we created the designs that we were making. And then she said, right, I'm going to leave you to it now. And she'd kind of prepared everything and it was everything that I needed to do. But she literally sort of with a bit of a smile left me to it. And I kind of was left with this class that I had to kind of finish and stuff. And I really, really enjoyed it and got some great feedback from some of the students there. And I ended up working in the flower school at Jane Packer for about 3 years, I think it was.
Wow.
So it was really, really exciting. From Jane Packer, I went to McQueen's, and again, an incredible florist to work for, really doing amazing work, one of the best, I would say, in the world, really. And I worked in the flower school, and I think at that time, so Facebook and Instagram and social media had really started to kind of take some ground, and people were becoming much more interested in the benefits. Because I think if you look back, the social media platforms back in the day, they weren't really, it wasn't a business. It wasn't a business platform. I think they were still trying to work out how to monetize and how to make them into a business. And at that time, it was just these platforms were an opportunity for people to connect with one another. And so my passion is photography and video, which I've loved for years and years and years, completely self-taught. And I was really, really lucky because this new wave of social media was really starting, and I had a few tricks up my sleeve and knew how to use some equipment. So I was able to, whilst I was teaching, started to manage the social media accounts.
For McQueen's?
Of McQueen's, yeah.
Right.
And so as over time, I managed to kind of transition my role to move away from actually working as a teacher and a florist to doing full-time social media and creating all the content and all those kind of photos and videos online.
I think you were the first person that I'd ever heard of in the floristry world who was a dedicated social media manager at a florist.
Yeah, the job didn't exist, and Callie, who is the founder of McQueen's, always laughs because she says that I made my own role. I kind of sort of made it happen. And I think it was a great time to get involved in social media, and it was a great time to do it, quite intensively, because I think the social media landscape has shifted quite a lot over the years. I think it's much more of a business platform now, and I think the organic reach and the kind of reach that you could get, 6-7 years ago is perhaps not quite the same as what it is now. But I was completely in love with the idea of creating little stories and creating content for McQueen's, because they've got so many different people that work there. And there was always something going on every single day, lots of different characters, and just flowers on a conveyor belt, coming in and out at all times of the day and night. And they work with so many different venues. And so it was a really fantastic job that basically took me around the world, and I got to see lots of very exciting things.
So I remember you going to some very glamorous parties in the States.
Yeah, so I mean, as a florist, I've taught in Beijing. I've been to Australia to teach. I've been to Italy. I've been to California. I've actually travelled to so many amazing places. Korea was an incredible place to go and teach. Um, yeah, so ultimately I got to go. The Queen's is very famous for actually creating the flowers for the Vanity Fair Oscar party, which they've done for many, many years. And I managed to kind of get myself on that job, which took a little bit of time, a few years, but I managed it.
But they needed photos and social media content, Duncan.
Yeah, exactly. It was less about the photos, but I was able to go in and document it and make sure we got a good
Yeah.
record of what we'd been up to.
And you built the Instagram following for McQueen's from zero to, I remember when it reached 100,000 and I was so, so excited for you. And it's now just gone on and on and on, hasn't it, to incredible numbers. So, and that was all because of the way that you started it. And I think what's really important is you said that word stories. Whenever I think about conversations we've had, because we've worked together as well, when you helped, you created videos at one of the workshops that I ran with Fiona back in London. We've also together worked on projects at New Covent Garden Flower Market and created 2 promo videos for them. And then you helped him with my Instagram for Florists promo as well. But fundamentally, I know that whenever I work with you, you're always thinking about the story you're trying to portray with an image, whether that's moving or still, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. I think social media is. I think it's very, very fascinating. I mean, you can get completely lost in. You can go wherever you want to go. I mean, I look at lots of beautiful illustrations. I look at lots of, really interesting artists, and it's an amazing place to go and be inspired. I think social media works best when you keep it to the essence of how the platforms were first created. And they weren't really created as business platforms, although there's a huge amount of business opportunity there. They were created for people to connect with one another. And so I think that's the best way to try and work with social media, is to really try and connect with people and actually just share a little glimpse of what it is that you do and what your approach is. And yeah, you need to promote what you're doing as well, but I think you need to be quite careful with the way that you promote yourself on social media. I think we are completely bombarded with advertisements from every single direction. And I think to present a beautiful image that, is for no other reason than it's a beautiful image, can be a much more powerful way of reaching new customers than telling them that they need to buy this or telling them that they really should buy that. Yeah, I think it should always be story takes precedent over sales. And I think if you keep that in the back of your mind, particularly those of us that are working as florists or in the creative medium, I think it's really simple. If you make it beautiful, if you make it interesting, people will respond to that. And
So, if you're a florist listening to this podcast today, and you get that, you get what you're saying, it has to be a story, and then you go into, say, your shop or your studio tomorrow, what advice would you give them as to how you can create a story? What were you looking for when you were at McQueen? Because you've moved on from there now, which we'll talk about in a minute. But if you're a florist, what advice would you give them about how to create a story?
I think it's just quite simple, really. I think for most florists, you're going to have a certain amount of stock that you're going to buy each week. And I think florists, Instagram and social media is particularly
So
good for
lucky.
of florists. So you have got all of the tools that you need really at the start of the week, and the flowers change throughout the year, so there's constantly evolving. I think what I would do is try and break everything down and perhaps talk about the things that are around you. And when something comes into season, first batch of something, it's always a great idea to kind of talk about the new flowers. But I think it's a good idea to just think about the different types of content that you can do, which it can be a little bit overwhelming, because I remember when Instagram first brought out stories, and this was another level on top of the grid that we were all having to deal with. And that instantly changed my job as a social media person.
Doubled it.
Doubled it. And so now we have things like Reels, we've got TikTok, we've got there's so many different things. I think the advice that I would give is I would zip it down to whatever you find is manageable. And often that is possibly just one or two social media accounts. And then I'd really try and break it down and work out how you can sort of create little moments out of what is around you. I think flowers are beautiful, and flowers can tell an amazing story. The colour, the texture, the scent, they are incredible. And it's a multi-billion-pound industry built around flowers around the world. But for me, I think people are just as kind of interesting, or more so, I would say. So perhaps the storytelling might be around the people that are making the flowers. It could be around, the people that are going to eventually have the flowers. So I think there's lots and lots of opportunity.
That's really interesting you say about the people, because I know that you created a whole series on the McQueen's blog all about meet the florist at Claridge's, meet the, this guy's in charge of contracts, so you were very keen to show the faces of the people behind the flowers, weren't you?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that was really impressive when I worked at McQueen's and when I worked at Jane Packer, I think if you go and work and there's amazing florists throughout the whole of London, really incredible florists. There's such a lot of talent there, and there's such a lot of characters there as well. I mean, working at somewhere like McQueen's, you could write a book on some of the things that go on and some of the characters that work there.
And all over the world they are as well, aren't they? It's a very cosmopolitan network of florists.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah.
So we've talked about stories, but I would really like to concentrate on video. And yesterday, when I was researching the interview, I found an incredible quote from somebody at Facebook, and they said, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a video is a library. Isn't that great?
I would say that's absolutely true. I mean, we're both into podcasts actually as a medium, because I love listening to podcasts, and I think podcasts are incredibly powerful. It's a completely different proposition, I would say, from video, but ultimately video is the best means of communicating an idea or as kind of concept in the shortest amount of time. And it's endlessly creative because you can do so many different things with video. And I actually think that sometimes like a little slow motion moment, like a little kind of a carefully recorded slow-mo moment of some flowers, can be just as powerful as a super fancy photo shoot. I think video is, and it's definitely proving to be becoming much more popular as the years
Absolutely.
go on.
All the trends that I read about social media and the internet in general are all saying that video is going to get more and more and more popular. And I think some of that might be due to the fact that most of us, our attention spans are very short, and we want bite-sized things, and we want something really
Yes.
quickly. There obviously are times when you want to watch something for longer, but I think, as you said, video is an easy, quick way of summing up something. You can show your personality. And have you noticed quite a few florists have been using reels to show like a slow-mo version of their bouquet or arrangement? Have you seen some of those?
Yeah, yeah. I've seen incredible stuff, all over the internet. It's really, really fantastic. I think that the most interesting thing about video is, the way technology has progressed over the years. I mean, if I think back to 15, 20 years ago, if you wanted to work in video, you had to have such a lot of skill and a lot of money to be able to access the equipment. So it's been democratized really, because we can all create video. And I think TikTok, I don't know whether you ever look at TikTok,
Not
get lost
recently.
in TikTok. Well, we can all create. There's no mystery. There's no mystery with it at all. We can all create stories with video. And I think that's incredibly exciting. If you're a business owner or a brand, it's so powerful to be able to send out video messages and bits of video content that can actually reach quite a wide audience. It's incredibly powerful. And like I say, I don't think, if you look back 20 years ago, that didn't seem to be something that would be possible.
No, it's the mobile phone, isn't it, that's really started it off, with photos. I remember back in the must be late 80s, early 90s, I was working for a company, an online database company in the city in London.
Yeah.
And my boss was a very, very wealthy man. And he had he had the first camera that I'd ever seen that he could take a photo and put it on his computer. And we all gathered round in his office
I mean,
because nobody had ever seen anything like it before.
it's incredible. I mean, if I think back when I went to school, I think I was, back in the day, I think I was the first crop of students that they introduced computer studies in. And I remembered we would spend literally the best part of an afternoon to write all this code. And it was very complicated. And the end result is we could get our name to pop up horizontally and kind of flicker up and down. And so if you look now, I mean, it's incredible.
Absolutely incredible. And I think it's really important to remember that sometimes, if you are having a moment when you're trying to promote your business online and you're getting really frustrated with an app or something, it's just to remember that when we were, at the beginning of our careers, that wasn't an option. You
Yeah,
didn't, if you wanted to promote your business, you had direct mail, you had face to face, or you lucky if you appeared in a newspaper or an article. Those are the only ways of promoting your business really, or you had a high street presence. Whereas now,
absolutely.
the world is your oyster when it comes to promoting your business, and that's possibly what's helped McQueen's to become so international as well, is because of the way that you portrayed them on social media and their website. You were one of the first florists to really show beautiful videos of creations by florists. For example, at Claridge's, I know you've done some work. I remember when you started the McQueen's YouTube channel, and as far as I'm aware, you're one of the first to really start florists publicizing their work using the YouTube platform, and it's just grown and grown and grown. And I think what was brilliant was that you were very thoughtful about the story and the music and the slow-mo. And did you enjoy that process of creating videos?
I did, and I suppose like it's fair to say that, I think if you're working for a much smaller business, it can seem quite overwhelming. I think what you were saying earlier about, how are people going to approach it in a small studio? I think McQueen's are incredibly lucky. I think when I was working there was 50 staff members. There was kind of 5 huge departments that focused on very specific areas of floristry, like contracts, school, weddings, events, shop. It was a mixing pot. Yeah, it was a huge amount of things going on. all the time. So actually it was fairly easy, really, because I just had to kind of, be in the right spot at the right time to capture people walking out of the building with beautiful arrangements. And
But I think you do yourself a disservice though, Duncan, because what you don't sort of illustrate is that you were in the spot, the right spot. You were made sure they walked past a specific background that would highlight the flowers. You put it on slow-mo so it looked absolutely stunning. You made sure you took photos in the right light. You added the right music. So I think you do yourself a little disservice because you are incredibly talented. So let's talk about your transition from a
very nice of you to
full-time.
say, by the way.
No,
Very nice of you to say.
totally have so much admiration for you and your work.
Oh,
Let's talk about September 2019, when I think it was around then that you transitioned.
Yes. So I had been thinking for quite a long time. I'd been at McQueen's for about 9 years and loved it. Absolutely loved it. It was a great job. But I think it's very, very natural after a certain amount of time to want to think about doing some other bits and pieces. And so I actually took the plunge and decided to go as a freelancer and content creator. Been lucky enough to retain McQueen's as a client, and so I've been able to kind of still work with them, creating content. But it's also given me the opportunity to get outside of the world and outside of flowers and look at other work, which has been really, really interesting.
So concentrating on video solely now.
Video and photography.
Okay.
I think, yeah. So I think it's a combination of all sorts, really, which is what I really, really like. It keeps it really interesting.
So what sort of work have you been doing since September year before last now? Yeah. I
Year
know the
before.
horrible pandemic happened that really scuppered your plans. How dare it? But
It's scuppered all of our plans, really. Yeah. So when I left McQueen's, I knew that I wanted to take it a little bit easy because I'd had 9 years working really, really quite intensively. And I kind of was adamant that I wanted to decompress a little bit. And obviously, I was still going to continue to work. But I embarked on what I like to call a period of discovery, which is trying to do lots of different types of work and finding out if, what kind of thing is going to fit, what sort of thing do I like to do. And so I've done all sorts. So I've kind of landed in the health and sort of, I suppose, lifestyle area, really. I've been doing some online tutorials for online learning for
filming them.
Yeah.
Filming them, yeah.
For interior designers and for like brand consultants. And I've been lucky enough to go and actually kind of go out and play, really, and explore different opportunities. The pandemic sort of, kind of 6 months into being a freelancer did completely change everything. So it's been a challenge. It's been really horrific in a lot of different ways, but I do believe that I think some good is going to come out of it, because I think so many people have been able to reassess their life, to examine what it is that they're doing, and to kind of really start to think about how they want to progress and how they want to live in the future. So I think for many of us, particularly people that live in big cities like London, it kind of, you keep going the whole time.
Yeah, you're like a little hamster.
Yeah. And I don't know, nobody really takes the time to stop and to kind of look to see, and I think to reevaluate and to kind of examine and take an inventory on what's happening. So I think that ultimately, this is going to have some benefits for a lot of people, which is a difficult thing to say because it has been very horrific with the
I'm a great believer in everything happens for a reason. And I mean, I understand, have been spending the time, then you haven't been working with clients on learning new software, for example, which is,
Yes.
time that you wouldn't have had if you'd been incredibly busy, which will long term, when we come out of the pandemic, eventually, will give you lots of scope for the kind of creative projects you can do. Can you talk more about the actual client work that you have done? So you've done some online training. So I know you helped me when I was promoting my Instagram for Florist online course. You did an amazing video, which is in the course, 2 videos actually. So what other kind of client work have you been doing? I think I saw you filming a podcast for a health practitioner as well. Is that right?
Yes, so I've done yes, I've recorded some podcasts. I'm actually very obsessed, as you know, because we talk a lot about podcasts when we catch up with each other. I listen to a huge amount of podcasts. I find them really inspiring. I'm kind of into the sort of health and the entrepreneurial kind of sort of sectors. So I've been doing a little bit of that, kind of filming podcasts, and actually sort of creating video content out of it for YouTube and for Instagram TV. What I've really particularly enjoyed doing is actually working with people to create long form content. So like a series of classes, which is really, really interesting because I've been able to kind of have a front row seat and learn myself as these creators have been actually sharing their knowledge.
So being paid to learn, that sounds pretty good to me.
Really amazing. So people like Fiona Humberstone,
The brand
the
stylist.
brand stylist. I've been really enjoyed working with her, and she's very inspirational. And I've learned lots and lots of things by
I'll be interviewing
actually.
her very soon.
She's amazing. She's
Yeah.
really incredible.
And who else have you been working with?
So I did some work with Sophie Robinson,
Interior
which
designer.
was really fabulous. Interior designer. She's got a really beautiful signature style. It's a
Very
very
different to Fiona's,
maximalist.
isn't it? She's very, very, very colourful.
Yeah, so it's an absolute celebration of colour, and
That's a lovely way of putting it.
yeah, so that was really interesting to kind of to learn a little bit about that. And yeah, no, it's been great to work on different types of projects,
Brilliant.
and actually away from flowers, but also equally, I have been working in flowers as well. And so that's it's kind of like returning home in some senses. It has made me realize that I do miss working with flowers, so I'm sure flowers are going to be a part of what I do in the future. um,
So what do you mean by that? As in filming them and photographing them, or actually
yes.
creating designs?
So filming, photographing. I was a teacher for a long, long time, so I'm thinking about perhaps putting a few classes together, which I
On
can
how to make floristry or video and photography?
both really. So
Cool.
flower
I'll be a
design,
student.
flower design, and yeah, I'm thinking of doing some social media, perhaps some video stuff. I'm really
Brilliant.
obsessed with learning. I use YouTube the whole time. I'm a big fan of Skillshare, which is a really great platform to go and learn lots of different things. Yeah, I've worked with flowers for a lot of years. I still love flowers, so flowers are always going to be part of what I do going
That's good
forward.
to hear. Not hairdressing.
Not hairdressing, no.
I would really appreciate your thoughts on whether or not you can take your videos using a phone or whether you need to splash out and buy a camera. What do you think?
I use all sorts. So I've got some really good, very, very powerful cameras that I use. I use my phone continually to create content. I've got one of the fairly new iPhones. I think it's the last generation. I think there's a new one that's out now, but that is perfectly good. It's really, really good for creating content. The only thing I'd say is I think it's a good idea to perhaps make sure that you've got some way of stabilizing your shots, or you've got some way of actually putting your camera onto some sort of a tripod. There are loads and loads of very, very inexpensive things that you can buy. That, I mean, I've got the things that give you the nice sort of steady
What do you
shot.
call those? The
There's a
gimbal? Is it
DPI,
gimbal?
yeah, so it's like a gimbal type thing, which
Yeah.
basically calibrates and keeps it really straight. So I can often be found walking around with one of these.
You can use those with your phone, can't you?
Yes, yeah, you can
Yeah.
attach your phone onto it, but
Yeah.
definitely you can buy an attachment that you can fit on top of a tripod that you can use. So I think those kind of things can help to make it a little bit better.
Yeah.
And actually, the majority of smartphones that you can get these days are gonna produce really, really reasonable pictures.
Yeah.
There are lots and lots of different software that you can use for editing.
What would you
Um,
recommend on your phone, Duncan?
on your phone, there's one called Splice.
Okay, I've not heard
Um,
of that one.
yeah, so there's so many different ones. I think people think there's a big mystery when it comes to editing content, and obviously there is a knack to getting it right. But essentially, what you're doing is just chopping the surplus and keeping, a good bit of content that's actually is all that you're going to need. And usually it's quite easy to sort of string a few different bits together. What I would suggest is, if you are, I think it's definitely a good idea to get involved in video. And I think just spend an afternoon on YouTube, and there are some amazing YouTubers out there doing incredible things. Just to get the basics.
Yeah.
You don't have to have the best camera. You really, really don't. You need a decent camera. Your smartphone is going to be plenty good enough for that. And yeah, I think you can pick up the very sort of basic aspects um, of creating decent video content.
And always remember to see if you can create a story.
Yeah, so this so obviously you don't generally just launch a video out without some sort of explanation, and it doesn't have to be a super elaborate story. I think florists are an amazing breed of people. They really, really are fantastic, and there's so many great characters out there. And I think for often for social media, it really depends on what your brand is. But to offer a little bit of your personality and a little peek behind the scenes can be a really, really good thing, because people can find it really interesting.
And I think what people can really gain from video that there's no way you can gain from an image is that first time you hear somebody's voice.
Yes.
And you think you know someone. I never forget, there's this fashion blogger that I used to follow, and the first time I heard her speak on video, it really like took me by surprise. I was like, oh my goodness, now I understand what kind of person she is.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I think it's such a cute, it's like 2 dimension to 3 dimension basically, isn't it?
100%. 100%. And actually, when I look at some of the content that I really enjoy the most, it's often the things that are, very lo-fi, really,
What do you
really
mean by
simple.
lo-fi?
Well, there's not a great deal of technical um, sort of knowledge needed to create it. It's usually, it can be something, it can be just a little moment. I mean, like a boomerang sometimes, a really cool little boomerang moment can be really nice. And so, yeah, so you don't have to spend a fortune. I think the thing with social media is, I think it's a good idea to sort of sit and work out, how you want to present yourself, and try and have some sort of a perimeter from where to work. And that's so that a little bit about what the tone of voice is going to be like, a little bit about the sorts of content you're going to share, definitely the sorts of content you're not going to share.
That's so important, isn't it? Where's your personal level? How much of your family or your house or your, yeah, how, or your, your views do you give? And yeah, it's again, it's individual to everybody, isn't it? So
Completely individual. When I look at some of the sort of accounts that I really love, there are some accounts that I absolutely adore where there isn't a person. It's all about either the flowers or the art, and the way that they curate everything is really fascinating. And there's a bit of mystery there, through to somebody that literally will share everything. So I think the other thing is you have to try and work out, what you're comfortable with as well, and how you would how would you like to present yourself. I think
100%, yeah.
I think having a bit of fun is the main thing,
Having
and make,
fun. Very
make
good.
sure you
You've
enjoy
totally
it.
inspired me to start doing more video, because yeah, I just think it's going to get more and more and more and more and more popular.
Yeah,
So let's
I
talk
agree.
about your 3 tips for people to take away, as well as all the amazing hints and tips you've given throughout the interview, Duncan. So what's number one?
Okay. So my first tip is, I think one of the things, and I think this might be a similar story for a lot of creative people. I know for myself, I'm full of ideas, and actually sometimes trying to distill those ideas into an action plan can be difficult. So I'm really into a lot of productivity apps and things like that. And I've basically tried everything. I'm kind of like productivity junkie, I would say. Yeah, so the one that I've found, which I think is really good, is called Millernote. I think it's particularly good for anyone that is a very visual person,
Hmm.
because I think we're all very, very different. Some people that are very analytical are going to work really, really well with certain software. I think Millernote is kind of one of the most beautiful sort of templates that I've seen in the productivity sort of sphere. And what you can do is you can organize all your thoughts, you can organize all of your designs. And I think it's particularly good for things like flowers, because often when you're working on a project, it's not just about one type of flower. It's usually about lots of different types of flowers, lots of different colors, lots of different venues. There's lots of moving parts. And Millernote is a really great place to keep everything in a project, but it kind of looks really beautiful, and you can organize it and customize it in the way that you want. I would say that if you are interested in getting into social media, one of the things that you need to be is very, very organized, because what you will need to do if you want to take it a little bit, take it a little bit more seriously, is to perhaps think further ahead and to plan content. So having something like Millernote is a great way of actually seeing everything and perhaps planning and working out. So that would be
Visually planning. Yeah, that sounds great. Sounds
that'd
great.
be my
What's number
first tip.
2, Duncan?
So number two, I think number two is what I would say is consistency is absolutely 100% the key to everything. It really, really is. And I think social media can be really, really overwhelming. And it can be actually, I mean, I love social media. It's really amazing, but it can be kind of a little bit unhealthy as well. You post something and perhaps it doesn't perform in the way that you like, and that can kind of put you off. I think that if you're going to get into social media or going to get into video, start to think about putting a bit of a plan together, and rather than just one piece of content, trial it over a period of time. I think the number one reason that I think I've seen quite a lot of success in social media, and particularly when I look at other people, is their consistency. And so you kind of need to keep it going. And I think it's no different than any other relationship that you have with anyone. If you're kind of best friends with somebody 1 minute and then you don't see them the next 3 months, it doesn't work for a great friendship. But if you sort of show up and, you know, the quality of what you're doing is at the same sort of standard, and I don't think it has to be amazing, but it has to be decent. But if you can present stuff, you know, and don't get put off if things don't go quite right. I think you sort of need to be in for the long haul.
And don't you
I
think
think,
sometimes, Duncan, you'll put something up and you think that's going to go wild, and it doesn't. And then other
yeah,
times you just think, oh, I need something to put on. What should I put on? And you put something on really quickly without any thought,
yeah,
and it skyrockets, and you're like,
yeah.
how can I replicate that?
I mean, it's so interesting. So when I very first started doing social media, so it's a brand new industry really, and it's been evolving. You know, we've been watching this evolve, and it continues to evolve. And in some ways, it's a little bit terrifying to think where it's all going to go. So there's a whole industry that's been built up with algorithms and with all of the metrics that everything is leveled on. And I've been in meetings with people for social media, and everybody's talking about the different metrics and how you measure this and how you measure that. And I think it's really simple. I think just create beautiful content. Don't get too bogged down with all of these metrics, because it's going to really cloud your judgment. Be consistent, make it beautiful, and I think people will notice you.
And ideally, your ideal audience will notice you because you're consistent and you have your own aesthetic, and people know what to expect and they know what you are known for. So ultimately, at the end of the day, I think we all know that most people are just like, what's in it for me? Are you going to entertain me? Are you going to inform me? Are you going to educate me? What can I gain from spending my precious time looking at your video or your photos? You know, is this a distraction for me from what's happening in the world? There's always got to be a reason for somebody, a motivation, hasn't there?
Yes, I completely agree. I think we're living in a time as well, is if you can kind of carve out an interesting little niche for yourself. I think all the florists that I see that are doing really amazing things, and there are some incredible florists doing things that I've never seen done before. But they've kind of got a territory. They've
Yeah.
decided on a little area, and they kind of really focus on that. And I think that can be, you know, I go very specifically to different accounts for different things. And if you can make yourself interesting to your audience for something very particular.
That I love that. Make yourself interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you've made yourself very interesting with your incredible wallpaper and your incredible shirt and your glasses. You're going to really, I'm in awe of your, is this an effect of recording video with Sophie?
No, I've got a filter. I take the filter away and all of this comes off. You won't be able to recognise me.
So what's number 3, Duncan?
I think number 3, and advice that I could give to a younger version of myself, would be to, I think it's very particularly prevalent in the day that we live at the moment, because we get so many notifications and we get so much kind of external, outside kind of interference, if you like. I think it is to try and forge your own path, and don't take too much from what's going on around you. I think comparison can be a really damaging thing. So I'm quite careful with my my intake of social media. So I kind of be careful to limit it to a really manageable level. So I don't have notifications or anything like that. So when I'm interested to go online, I go online. But equally, I think, I think it's just to have a sense of, you know, be brave in what it is that you do, and don't be too preoccupied with what everybody else is doing. So I think if you go down that path, and it's super easy to go down that path, you know, we're all comparing against each other, and I think I would say you do you is my advice.
That's such a lovely way to finish off the interview, because it's something I'm really passionate about. And I know, you know, you have to find yourself. You have to know what you want to be, and you want to. Oh, I've gone all tingly just saying that, but yeah, it's amazing the internet that we have nowadays. It's amazing social media, but it has given you the opportunity to be able to compare yourself more quickly and more readily with other people. And I think that's great because it can give you sort of a benchmark, but don't let that stop you being your own individual self and being you, and not being afraid of being you.
Absolutely. I can't agree more. I think if you should try and shut off some of the distraction, and try and limit, the amount, because it can be unhealthy. And yeah, I think I absolutely agree with everything that you say there, Rona. I think it's just a case of actually just forging your own path and kind of enjoying it as well.
Oh, that's so lovely. So lovely. Well, I wish you lots and lots of luck with the next path that you take, Duncan.
Next
Hopefully, it's lots
chapter.
of floral and lots of video and lots of photos.
Yeah, all my
If
favourite
people want,
things.
absolutely, I'm going to put some show notes with links to everything you've chatted about. But if people want to find you online, where can they find you?
So you'll be able to find me at duncanmccabe.com.
And on Instagram?
On Instagram, Mr. D. McCabe.
Super, super. Thank you so much for all of the incredible advice that you shared and all the hints and tips. I feel I'm going to look at you in a different light now, knowing that you started as a hairdresser, and I and I and I'm just so grateful that our paths have crossed. I think it happened when you first started tweeting me, which means we've known each other quite a long time. And I'm really grateful that we've been able to work together as well. And I hope we'll be able to work together again soon in the very, very future.
Fantastic. And beans, as I've only known how to do one hairstyle, which is big hair, big 80s hair. If you ever fancy having your hair done, I'll be very
Thank
careful with the
you.
brush.
I think I might pass on that one,
I
but
think it'd
thank
be
you
a
so
nice big
much.
Bonnie Tyler kind of thing going on. Might work well.
No, that's so kind of you, Duncan, but I think we'll stick to the cameras, okay?
Okay. Thank
Thanks
you.
so
Thank you for
much.
inviting me. I've really enjoyed it. It's been amazing to have a
My
good chat.
pleasure.
Thank
My
you very
pleasure.
much.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye bye.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Duncan. It was so much fun. He is such a lovely guy and so knowledgeable when it comes to creating content. I've learned so much of him, having spent time working with him over the last few years. And what he actually said was he loves learning, just like me. I love learning, and every time we see each other, we catch up and say, give each other advice on, oh, I've learned this, have you learned that, and have you heard about this, and have you heard about that? So yeah, even in our later middle life years, dare I say it, yeah, it doesn't mean you should stop learning. So carry on learning, and I hope that Duncan has inspired you as much as he has inspired me to really consider my content creation moving forward and to do more video. Yeah, I'm totally inspired, so look out for some reels here. I've said it now, so I'm going to have to do it. It'd be amazing if you'd like to subscribe to my podcast either on your podcast provider or on YouTube, and even more incredible would it be if you'd like to give a review. So I'll see you next week with another podcast and another video. Take care.